Well, it is our weekly conversation with Adam Terry, and unfortunately, Adam, first time we're looking back at a loss this season. It felt twofold to me. Like it felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong for Syracuse, but it also felt like Clemson's defensive line may have made none of that matter, even if it had gone right for the Orange. What are your main thoughts coming out of this one, the good and the bad from Saturday?
Well, I think the good that you take away from a situation like this is the defense looks solid. You're starting to see more guys in the back end with rotation. That's going to give depth throughout the rest of the season. Defensive line looked pretty good. And, the difficulty of that is, it's hard to say, oh, you gave up 31 points. But in a scenario that you're backed up quite often, you go down 14, it's a little bit more of a struggle to come back because you change your game plan a little bit. Offensively, there were circumstances that were dictated by players, not doing what they're supposed to, dropping balls, and so on and so forth, turning the ball over. So when you look at that offensively, I think they still have the pieces to compete at a high level. But it was the scenario that you start giving the ball away and you're unable to convert on third down. It just leads to a disaster and an uphill battle against the team that, yes, they're down. Like Clemson is not the Clemson of old that we're accustomed to, but they still have a lot of talent, and you saw that with some of the young guys raising up and taking over positions that nobody expected them to do well in. So that wide receiver position, guys were stepping up on the Clemson side of the ball and make Cade Klubnik look pretty good.
Klubnik's final numbers 263 too. But you talk about young guys. Tyler Brown, 9 catches, $153. That dude's a freshman, right? Like Clemson's starting to put these talented guys out on the field. We saw, I think it was a couple of their freshman reserve defensive linemen spent the whole day in the backfield. Like it seems like they've turned to the youth movement, and we saw those guys really show out on Saturday.
Yeah, no, Brown was a guy that we spoke about in the booth when we had a quick conversation with Clemson's play-by-play. So, you kind of go through it a little bit, and they're like, oh, they're pleasantly surprised with him. He's progressing, and then, boom, he pops on the map really quick. And the same thing goes with their defensive end, a true freshman coming off the ball and having a good day. So, look, I still believe in what Syracuse has. I think they have all the pieces that are needed in order to compete at a high level in the ACC. These next 2 weeks are, can you get one, right? And I think UNC is the one that potentially you could get, but both are on the road. So it's shaping up where, Virginia Tech's not as bad as we expected later on in the season. Boston College, I don't think is that good, but they've got a couple wins under their belt now. So, but these are interesting weeks, these next few weeks, and fortunately, the thing that we've always talked about over the past couple seasons is injuries, and they're not nearly as banged up as previous years.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything, at least a high volume of significant, obvious stuff happening against Clemson, where last year it felt like half the team got hurt at various points during the game, including the quarterback, Garrett Schrader. And hopefully, he took a vicious lick there on the first drive, but hopefully he's okay going forward. And the key to that, and we talk about this all this time, is the offensive line. And, you go against, I don't care what year it is, you go against Clemson's defensive line, it's not going to be an easy task. How alarmed are you by what happened up front in this game? Is it, okay, it's Clemson, this is the hardest game you have all year against this, or are there signs out there on the O-line that are worrisome going forward?
No, I think it's coming along. I was surprised to see Kalen Ellis in as long as I did. He came in for Jacob Bradford. I don't know if there was a injury there. It didn't seem as though, but, historically, Kalen Ellis has been a starter. And for him, he's got to get into playing shape. I think there's getting into shape. There's getting into practice shape. But when you're out there and the bullets are flying and it doesn't matter who you are. I've seen guys, especially at the offensive line position, where guys get in a lot of snaps, and it is just one of those where it's a different type of conditioning. You're sucking wind, you're pushing on guys. So hopefully we continue to see his progression as that right guard. And you've created some depth. You've got Josh Aloha, who's playing center. He can go in there at any stretch right there. He looked like he could pop in there at any time. So you've created some depth, and now it's just about execution. And, it wasn't a great day for him in pass protection, giving up a bunch of sacks, but it's also that's the nature of the beast. Everybody on that offensive line would rather go forward than have to stop somebody going backwards.
Yeah, Schrader sacked 5 times in the game. From what Dino made it sound like after Adam, the Ellis thing, that was planned in advance to get a rotation going because Clemson goes so deep. So I wouldn't read any injury stuff into that, which is good at this point of the year. We're looking at the wideouts, and man, there were drops, and Alford had at least one. I think Donovan Brown had one. It's one. You feel it more in this game, don't you, against Clemson, like the loss of Getz and the loss of your number one sure-handed guy than you might in other games, right?
Well, they all sting, right? I mean, those are the ones that you say, "Oh, I wish I could have done that." Oh, this, if this happens, look at what if we get this block here. Look what is down the road. Or hey, you make this catch. Look how much green grass you have. Don't hit this guy out of bounds. You're returning a punt. So there's a lot of shoulda, coulda, woulda. And at some point, right, like it is the progression into who's going to mature, who's going to be the guy that you can count on. And, I still look at the guys that are out on the field and wide receiver-wise, Damian Alford, Donovan Brown, Umari Hatcher, those guys are very capable. And the guy that stepped up was Valari. Mm-hmm. So you saw that a little bit of, hey, guys are getting into the rotation. Who's going to seize the moment? And on that day, it was Valari. But now I guess there might be some injury concerns coming out of this game for him.
Yeah, but Dino alluded to something about that after the game. Not sure exactly what the deal is, and we'll see if we get any updates throughout the week. Man, Valari was, Adam, he was really close to like a legendary day. Like he had that great receiving touchdown. He almost threw for one, and he almost ran for one. That would have been one of the all-timers if a couple of those other plays connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story. New York kid coming out of Long Island, kind of snubbing Syracuse, going to Michigan, having an opportunity, gets stuck on the depth chart out there, and then decides to come back to Syracuse and change his position. So, I think for him, there's this roller coaster of emotions like, hey, I made it. I'm, at a Power 5 national contender. Ooh, I'm not going to have the opportunity. I'm going to go to Syracuse. I must have a relationship with some people out there. And, he's seizing his opportunity as it's coming to fruition. And you've seen him in a multiple roles through training camp, the double pass, the wildcat type of formation, and then just the pure ability to go out and catch the football. And as well as blocking, right? Let's never overlook that one because as a tight end, you're going to have to block. So you love what you see out of him, and now it's just more guys continuing down that path of development. Each week it's getting better. You can't have regressions right now at this point in the season.
No, and heck, on the catch he had for the touchdown, the amount of guys he ran through, clearly Dan's been doing a little work in the weight room because he was knocking some guys around out there, which was good to see. Adam Terry with us. We're putting the Clemson game on ice, starting to look ahead toward North Carolina. What'd you make of Marlowe Axe's day? I mean, he was fine out there for the most part, but man, it's got to be killing him this week, I'd imagine. The drop pick 6 and then the late hit out of bounds. I mean, give the acting award to Cade Klubnik, but it's one right out of me. You just can't put yourself in that position.
Yeah, you hit somebody out of bounds, and for Syracuse, we just have to continue to understand as we look around, you're not going to get the calls that other teams get sometimes. A couple times at the beginning of the season, we got some good calls, but this one is, it gets an Emmy. Cade Klubnik gets an Emmy on the sideline, but at that point in time, it was so far through the play and, guys coming back out onto the field. That's just that's one you want back. I mean, it's a boneheaded move. That's the veteran leadership that has to come out of that. You could have come back and had that interception, but it didn't come. And I think that was the penalty was a big turning point because you got off the field, you were expecting a return, and then now you've got to go out there, and they're able to continue to march down the field.
Yeah, no, so even though they didn't score on that drive, it just throws the whole thing off. And field position changes and everything. It's one, especially against Clemson, you just can't leave stuff out on the field. You just can't leave stuff out on the field. And it felt like that's what Syracuse did the whole game long, be it penalties or the drops, both on offense or defense. As Adam Terry is with us, and it's Clemson, right, Adam? You watch that game. Clemson's not Clemson, but they still got some dudes out there, right? That's still I get it. They're 3-2, but that's still a really tough team to go against.
Yeah, and they're young. I mean, they're counting on a lot of young guys. As you look through their starts all the way across the board, you look at a guy like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and you're like, man, he's a good player. He's this, he's that. He's only got 18 starts under his belt. So you're looking at a Cade Klubnik. That was going into his sixth start. You're like, oh, this guy's pretty good, and then you're like, well, he's never really been tested. He was put into the game to replace DJ Uyonglele last year, and that was like his first thing. And then he really put himself on the map in the ACC championship game, and that is kind of the legacy that you're looking at. But the ACC championship game was a prolific day for him, but that was start number 2. So all of these things, they still have a young team. You look at Brown at the wide receiver; he's a true freshman. They're young, very talented, but they're still finding their way. You don't have Venables anymore as their defensive coordinator. You lost your offensive coordinator to be the head coach down at Virginia, and now it's a bunch of new guys in there at the coordinator position, and not just necessarily the coordinator position, but also the coaching positions as well. As coaches leave, they bring the talent with them. So they're young. They still have Dabo at the helm, but they're still learning with new position coaches and new coordinators.
With all the talk around DJU last year, it felt like Klubnik started all last season just because of all the talk about that. But you're right, he didn't take over the job until right at the end of the year. And my goodness, on the quarterback side of things, is that going to change this week? Drake May's got to be right around 30 career starts or so. He's in his third year starting for Carolina. He's going to be a top 5 draft pick at the absolute worst in the NFL draft this season. Probably the second quarterback off the board. How tough a test is this going to be when you're going against a legit top draft pick at quarterback this week?
Well, you got to be on top of it. You're going to go into a hostile environment. Normally, you're not saying that going down to Chapel Hill is a hostile environment, but they're winning right now, so everybody feels good about it. You do have a bona fide top 5 pick at the helm, and Syracuse has faced that in the past, but you're on the road, it's a 3:30 game, and you're reeling after a game that even up until the third quarter, I thought you could have come back into. You really had the opportunity to come back into that game. After that swing during halftime, that middle 8 right there, I wasn't too excited, but you could still tell that Syracuse could move the ball. It was just, wide receivers were beating people down the field on the sideline. So there was still an opportunity to hit some of those deep balls. They just caught them out of bounds. But coming back into this week for UNC and Mac Brown led team, they're a very good team. They're well coached, and they're in the hunt right now. They're in that hunt to, hey, can we be recognized at the high level of going into the ACC championship, potentially going the playoff if they continue to win out.
Yeah, down to 1 of 4. They did not play this last week, so it was not at risk, but down to 4 undefeated teams in the league after Syracuse and Duke lost this last weekend with Carolina, Florida State, Miami, and Louisville all out there undefeated. So we'll see how it goes, and go figure Syracuse plays 2 over the course of the next week. All right, Adam, good stuff. Safe trip down to Carolina this week, and we'll do it again next Monday, my friend.
All right, sounds like a plan.